Dear students, welcome to DSEJ Home Classes, a digital initiative by Directorate of School Education, Jammu. This is Jyoti Diwan. I have brought a short story for you, A Handful of Dates by Tayeb Salih, Class 11th, Chapter 14th. Before we proceed, let us know something about the author. Tayeb Salih was born in 1929 in Al-Daba in Sudan. He was one of Sudan's greatest authors of the 20th century. He graduated from the University of Khartoum with a Bachelor of Science before leaving for the University of London in England. He worked for the BBC's Arabic service and later became Director General of the Ministry of Information in Doha, Qatar. He spent the last 10 years of his working career with UNESCO in Paris, where he held various posts and was UNESCO's representative in the Arab states of the Persian Gulf. Let us know something about the story. A Handful of Dates, a short story, was published originally in Arabic in 1964 in a collection of stories, The Wedding of Zain. The action of this story, as with many of the stories written by Tayeb Salih, occurs in the fictional setting of the village of Wad Hamid, which is in central Sudan. This short story is told through the eyes of a young boy as he experiences an epiphany, a critical moment of awareness that perhaps marks his passage from a child to an adult. The boy's love and admiration for his grandfather is diminished as the boy heard his grandfather talking very badly with Massoud. A Handful of Dates, Muthi Bar Khajur. Now let us read the summary in detail. A Handful of Dates is a Sudanese Arabic short story. Greed, selfishness, rejection, injustice, conflict, lust, and insolvency is the main theme of the short story. The story is written in the first person. In this story, the storyteller has shown how a person whose hobby was to marry women one after another became insolvent and wretched. The author has narrated that in his childhood he used to follow his grandfather wherever he went. The narrator and his grandfather spend a lot of time together, more time than the narrator does with his father. The narrator also likes helping his grandfather and likes reading the Quran to him. It's as though the narrator not only loves his grandfather, but that he also has a strong connection with him. He is always there for his grandfather, and the grandfather is always there for the narrator. However, it's interesting that on closer inspection, the narrator's feelings for his grandfather change during the story when the narrator sees how his grandfather treats Massoud. Once he went to a garden of dates that belonged to a person called Massoud. On that day, the ripe dates were being harvested. Massoud asked Arthur's grandfather to the harvesting of his dates. Arthur accompanied his grandfather. Many people were gathered there. Massoud stood aloof as if he was not all concerned in the harvesting. Arthur realized the soft feelings of Massoud as he was pained due to the suffering of trees like human beings. Arthur's grandfather walked towards the sacks of dates and gave him a handful of dates, which he started eating. All the sacks of dates were handed over to other people, including the author's grandfather. Arthur's grandfather gave nothing to Massoud. After receiving the dates, the author's grandfather said to Massoud, "You are still 50 pounds in debt to me." Then all departed. Massoud just made a noise in his throat like the rasping of a lamb being slaughtered. The author felt pity for Massoud. He started hating his grandfather from that moment for his greed and inhumanity. The author ran off into the distance and spewed up the dates he had taken. The author, his grandfather, and Massoud are the main characters of the story. The author is very sympathetic to Massoud because of his insolvency. The author's grandfather was a very dutiful man. He is hopeful of purchasing the remaining land of Massoud in future. Massoud is negligent to his duty but lustful to women, for which he lost almost all the property inherited from his father. In narrating the story, the author has employed subjective method and narrates his story in the first person. The story in structure is a good one, but it ends in the climax. The dialogues used in the story are sparing and reliable, which have contributed to the development of the story and succeeded in revealing the inner feelings, emotions, and motives of the characters. The setting of the story is well and realistic. The author has given a sparing picture of the setting of the story. The philosophy of life is also found in the story. The author has expressed his philosophy of life indirectly, that excessive desire for women makes one negligent to one's duty and thus ruins him. The language of the story is simple and easy to comprehend. In maintaining the qualities of a good short story as unity of purpose, brevity, spontaneity, and universality, the author has succeeded somehow. As all the elements and qualities of a good story are present in it, so it may be called a short story of the first grade. Dear students, let us come to the theme of the story, A Handful of Dates. The short story, A Handful of Dates by Tayeb Salih uses many different themes and literary techniques to tell a story of an innocent young boy discovering life's hardships. The story begins with 3 introductory paragraphs which contain background information about the grandfather and a boy from whose perspective the reader receives the story. These paragraphs reveal that the boy is young, innocent, and very intelligent. He possesses a great love for nature. His grandfather is a man of power who is very tall and has a beard which is described to the reader as being beautiful and soft. The story then moves on to the neighbor Massoud, who inherited a large sum of land from his father but gradually was forced to sell the land to the boy's grandfather due to an excessive number of wives. The action of the story describes a day of harvesting in Massoud's date field, where various people from the town appear and help the effort as well as eat some of the dates. When the harvesting is done, the grandfather as well as 4 other men divide the product and take their share away. This sickens the boy, who runs into the forest and throws up the dates which he had eaten. Salih uses different literary techniques as well as various themes in order to describe the loss of innocence. Now we will briefly read about the characters of the story. First of all, we will read about the narrator. The narrator of the story is a young boy who is proud to be at his grandfather's side and enjoys going to the mosque and learning Quran. The story is about his realization of the truth about this old man he looked up to and his refusal to grow up to be like him. The greed of his grandfather turns him against his grandfather. He even vomits the dates given to him by his grandfather. He is full of humanity and kindness. He is indeed a lovable boy. The grandfather. The grandfather is a greedy and selfish old man who enjoys seeing his neighbor humiliating and suffering. He enjoys having the man indebted to him and humiliating him so he can feel more important and powerful. His real face is in direct contrast to the high opinion his grandson had of him. He is money-minded. He reminds Massoud at the time of harvesting dates that he still owes him 50 pounds. He never laughs. Now it comes the turn of Massoud. Massoud is the poor neighbor who had almost his entire land taken away by the boy's grandfather. The boy's grandfather looks down upon him for his lifestyle of having a lot of wives. The entire village doesn't think highly of him, ignoring his words even on his land or that what's left of it. He is lazy by nature. He is a lover of women. He wants to marry a new woman very frequently. Whenever he marries a new woman, he has to sell 1 or 2 acres of land. He is a foil to the boy's grandfather. But he is very human and feels even the date palm has a heart. He sings sweet songs and is quite jolly. Now let us take a look at the imageries shown in the story. The author describes how his grandfather would take him wherever he went, meaning they spent a lot of time together. The boy then says the mosque, the river, and the fields. These were the landmarks in our life. This imagery suggests that the boy's childhood was characterized by learning and idyllic encounters with nature. The boy describes how after going to the mosque, he would dart off to go to the river. To emphasize this, he uses imagery describing himself as running quick as a genie. This imagery is used to give us a sense of how eager the boy was to get down to the river. The boy also tells us that he used to give rein to his imagination. He describes this in the following passage. I love to give rein to my imagination and picture to myself a tribe of giants living behind that wood. A people tall and thin with white beards and sharp noses like my grandfather. This imagery emphasizes the boy's vivid imagination and also suggests his idolization for his grandfather. Now comes irony. Dear students, as you know, an irony is a literary technique. The basic meaning of irony is the difference between how things seem to be and the reality. Let us find irony in the story. The boy notices in Massoud's face after he invites them to the harvest that he doesn't really want his grandfather to be there despite the invitation. His grandfather, on the other hand, is more than happy to attend. Massoud doesn't want it because he knows the humiliation he will face, and his grandfather is happy because he will have a chance to humiliate him in front of other villagers. The perception of the grandfather in the little boy's eyes and the naivety is represented in his belief that the land always belonged to him, since the God's creation. The irony is that he took the land from another man, while his grandson had this naive, religion-inspired perception, and in the grandson's eyes, his taking it away from another man is unimaginable and immediately evokes a repulsive reaction. The grandfather also mentions religion and that with God's help he will be able to take away the rest of his neighbor's property, leaving him with nothing. ये कहानी जीवन की कठिनाइयों की खोज करने वाली एक मासूम युवा लड़के की है। ये लड़का बहुत इंटेलिजेंट है, नेचर से प्यार करने वाला है और ये लड़का लेखक भी है जो खुद ही अपनी कहानी बता रहा है। वो हमेशा अपने दादा के साथ रहता है क्योंकि वो दादा को ही अपना आइडल मानता है। एक बार वह खजूर के एक बगीचे में अपने दादा के साथ गया जो मसूद नामक व्यक्ति का था। उस दिन पके खजूर की कटाई हो रही थी और लोग भी आए थे। बच्चे यानी लेखक को उसके दादा ने हाथ भरकर खजूर खाने को दी। खजूर की भरी हुई बोरियां वहां गए लोगों ने आपस में बांट ली। मसूद को कुछ नहीं मिला। खजूर ले लेने के बाद उस बालक के दादा ने मसूद से कहा कि अभी उसने 50 पाउंड कर्ज के रूप में चुकाने हैं। बालक इस लालच और बुरे बर्ताव के लिए अपने दादा से घृणा करना शुरू कर देता है। बालक यानी लेखक कुछ दूरी पर जाकर वो खाई हुई खजूरें मुंह से बाहर उगल देता है। लेखक को पता चलता है कि उसके दादा मसूद की बाकी बची हुई जमीन भी हड़पने के चक्कर में है क्योंकि मसूद को नई शादियां करने का शौक है, इसलिए वो अपनी विरासत में मिली संपत्ति खो रहा होता है। Dear students, I hope you liked the story. Stay safe and healthy. Stay at home. God bless you.